Have you ever sat alone wondering when things changed? You used to get calls just to say hi, hugs at the door, maybe even the occasional "thank you, Mom" or "I love you, Dad." Now, silence. Days go by without a word. Messages read, but not answered. Holidays feel quieter, not because of age, but because the people you love the most seem to have turned the volume down on you. If you've ever felt this way, I want you to know, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not powerless. There comes a time in life, especially after 60, when we begin to notice the shift. The relationships we poured our hearts into, the children we raised with everything we had, they begin to drift. Some become distant, others stay close, but only when it's convenient. And for too many parents, there's a painful question that echoes louder with each passing year. Did I do something wrong? Or am I just forgotten? Let's clear something up right away. Feeling hurt doesn't make you weak. But staying stuck in that pain, clinging to kids who no longer show respect, that can slowly chip away at your self-worth, your energy, your peace. This video is for every parent who's felt the sting of being left behind. We're going to talk about something that might feel uncomfortable at first, but can completely shift the way you carry yourself moving forward. Not through arguments, not through guilt, not through begging, but through something far more powerful. Silence. Silence isn't about giving up or giving the cold shoulder. It's about pulling your energy back from those who don't value it. It's about reclaiming your dignity without raising your voice. And it's about finally putting yourself first. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Let's start here. Have you ever noticed what happens when you stop reaching out first? When you stop calling, stop texting, stop checking in just to see how they're doing? At first it feels strange, like you're doing something wrong. But then, something shifts. That silence you're holding, it starts to echo. And your kids hear it louder than any word you could say. Because silence makes people uncomfortable. It makes them wonder. Why hasn't Mom called? Why didn't Dad text back? Is something wrong? See, they're used to noise, to you filling the gaps, fixing the tension, soothing the awkward pauses. But when you stop speaking, they start thinking. That quiet space you create, it becomes a mirror. And suddenly they have to face themselves without the comfort of your constant presence. You're not punishing them, you're just no longer performing for their attention. You've spent years, maybe decades, proving your love, proving you're there, proving you're worth calling back, worth respecting, worth hearing. But at some point, the proving has to stop. Because when someone can't see your value after all you've given, maybe the problem isn't your voice, maybe it's their ears. Here's a truth you might need to hear today. You are not your children's savior. You raised them, you taught them, you sacrificed for them. That was your role as a parent, and you did it with love. But once they're grown, once they begin making their own choices, they carry the responsibility for how they treat you. And no amount of parenting, no amount of giving, fixing, or holding on can make someone be kind, or call more often, or show gratitude. And still, so many parents stay stuck in the past, replaying old conversations, rewriting memories, trying to figure out what went wrong and where. It's like sitting in a theater, watching the same painful movie over and over again, hoping the ending will somehow change. But it doesn't. Because the past can't be rewritten. It can only be released. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And you can't keep sacrificing your peace for the sake of someone who doesn't notice your suffering. You might be thinking, but I love them. I can't just walk away. And you don't have to walk away. You just have to stop chasing. Love doesn't mean abandoning yourself. It doesn't mean staying open to mistreatment just because you share DNA. You can love someone deeply and still protect yourself from being hurt by them again and again. That's not cruelty. That's self-care. You might not even realize it, but the more you try to fix things, to reconnect, to make the relationship what it used to be, the more you're slowly losing parts of yourself. Your energy, your pride, your joy. It gets swallowed up in their absence. And if you're not careful, your identity becomes tied to whether or not your child answers the phone. Let me tell you something simple but powerful. Your value does not depend on your child's love. Say that out loud if you need to. Repeat it to yourself every morning if you must. Because too many good, loving parents fall into the trap of thinking that if their kids don't show love back, it must be their fault. That they must have failed somehow. But your worth isn't something your child can give or take. It existed long before they were born, and it remains long after they've pulled away. Your kindness, your wisdom, your heart. None of that disappears just because someone else forgot how to see it. You don't lose your value because someone else lost their appreciation for it. Their silence doesn't erase your goodness. But here's the secret, and this might be the hardest part. To truly hold on to that truth, you have to get quiet too. Not in anger, not to punish, but to reset, to shift the energy back into your own life, into your hobbies, your healing, your happiness. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to defend your pain. And you certainly don't have to keep chasing after someone who can't even acknowledge your effort. When you stop speaking to people who don't listen, that's when you start hearing yourself again. That's when you start healing. And in that silence, that intentional, gentle silence, something else beautiful begins to happen. You start to rebuild. You start to rediscover who you are when you're not constantly being someone's fallback, their emotional safety net, or their emergency contact when the rest of the world fails them. You start becoming whole again, quietly, steadily, and powerfully. Now, something unexpected happens when you begin to reclaim that quiet space around you. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, like you're missing something. The phone doesn't ring. The door doesn't open. There's no knock, no text, no apology. And a part of you wonders, did they even notice? But give it time. Because here's what happens. Your silence starts doing the speaking for you. You see, your kids may not say it out loud, but when you stop giving them access to your energy, when they no longer hear your voice smoothing things over, or see your name pop up every time they're in a bind, they start to feel it. They feel the shift, the calm, the distance. And deep down, they know what caused it. Because you weren't dramatic. You didn't blow up. You didn't throw their mistakes in their face. You simply got quiet. And silence, when it's real and consistent, makes people question what they once took for granted. Suddenly they're wondering why you're not calling, why you haven't checked in, whether you're still upset or, maybe even worse, whether you've truly moved on. That's the power of walking away with dignity. It turns the noise down so low that they can finally hear their own actions echo back at them. But this isn't about making them feel guilty. It's not about getting even. It's about no longer letting your emotional life be held hostage by their inconsistency. Because every time you stop yourself from reaching out, every time you resist the urge to just check in, you're telling yourself something powerful. I matter too. You're showing yourself that your peace is worth protecting, that your voice has value, even when it's not being heard, and that your life doesn't have to revolve around someone else's lack of appreciation. But let's not pretend it's easy. There are days when the memories come flooding back. When you see an old photo or hear a song that brings you back to gentler times, and your heart might ache with a longing that words can't fix. You might wonder if maybe you were too harsh. If maybe, just maybe, you should have held on a little longer. That's the trap, the loop, the place where too many parents get stuck. Because grief doesn't just come when someone dies. Sometimes it comes slowly, in the form of distance, in unanswered messages, in broken traditions, in the quiet that used to be filled with laughter. And it hurts. But that pain doesn't mean you should go backwards. It means you're healing. Healing doesn't always feel like strength. Sometimes it feels like loneliness, like silence, like long walks alone and conversations that never happened. But every time you choose not to chase, not to explain, not to beg, You are rebuilding, piece by piece, quietly. And here's something else to remember. Your value is not up for debate. Not now, not ever. There are going to be moments when your child's silence makes you question everything, when their absence feels like a judgment, when you wonder, if I really mattered, wouldn't they reach out? But that's a dangerous road, because it hands your worth to someone else like it's something they can decide for you. They can't. Your worth isn't smaller just because someone stopped seeing it. That's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You don't need to keep proving you were a good parent. Your life has already said it loud enough. And if they didn't hear it the first time, repeating it won't make a difference. You see, people often don't appreciate what they always assume will be there. They get used to your kindness, to your unconditional love, to the way you forgive and call back and say, I love you, even after they've disappointed you. But when that stops, when the air grows still, it forces them to confront something uncomfortable. Maybe they were the ones who stopped trying. And that realization, it sits heavy. Heavier than any lecture or emotional outburst could ever deliver. But again, that's not the point of this. You're not here to teach them a lesson. You're here to finally live your own life, free from emotional whiplash. And the best part? When you start focusing on yourself, truly focusing, the healing deepens. You begin to master your emotions. That doesn't mean you never cry, or never get angry, or never feel that pang of missing someone. It just means you stop letting those emotions drive the car. You feel it, and then you breathe. You pause before replying. You reflect before reacting. You no longer send that long message at 10 p.m., trying to explain how much you've been hurt. You don't scroll their social media to see if they're doing fine without you. You don't sit by the phone hoping it'll buzz with a word, any word. Instead, you get up. You go for a walk. You listen to the birds. You read something that makes you smile. You talk to a friend who reminds you that you're still needed, just maybe not by the person you were clinging to. You shift the attention inward. You take that energy you once poured into trying to fix a broken connection, and you use it to strengthen the most important relationship you have, the one with yourself. Because let me tell you, when you start showing up for yourself, when you build a day around your joy instead of someone else's absence, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop hoping they'll come back. You stop needing them to. You stop defining your peace by someone else's presence. And maybe they will come back. Maybe one day they'll wake up and realize what they've lost. Maybe they'll send a message or ask to talk or show up at your door with a heart full of regret. But by then, you won't be the same person they left. Because in the silence, you became stronger, calmer, clearer. You stopped being the version of yourself who needed their approval to feel whole. You stopped chasing the apology that never came. You stopped rewriting the past, hoping for a different ending. You started living. And that quiet, steady strength is what they'll feel the most. Not because you shouted, but because you didn't have to. You might be wondering, if I stay quiet, if I stop reaching out, if I stop chasing the relationship I once had with my children, does that mean it's over? Not necessarily, because here's something that may surprise you. They often come back. Not because you begged, not because you reminded them of everything you've done, but because you stopped. You let go. You gave space. And in that space, reality sets in. People remember how you made them feel. Over time, they begin to notice what's missing. The messages they used to ignore, now they scroll up and read them again. The birthday cards, the home-cooked meals, the voice that used to say, "I'm proud of you," even when no one else would. Those memories don't fade. They just get buried under ego, distractions, and pride. But silence uncovers them. And suddenly they start to wonder, why isn't Dad calling? Why hasn't Mom reached out? What changed? That curiosity starts small. Maybe they watch your Facebook story. Maybe they text you a random photo with no real explanation. Just a, "Hey." like nothing happened. Don't be fooled. That's not just a message. That's the beginning of realization. But here's the key. When they do come back, and many do, you have a choice. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to say no. You're not obligated to explain yourself. You get to decide what access looks like now. Not from pain, but from peace. Because the strongest version of you isn't the one that argues. It's the one that smiles and says, "I'm okay, even if you don't return." That's not cold. That's not bitter. That's healing. It's the kind of healing that doesn't need permission. And that brings us to something many of us search for, but almost never receive. Closure. So many parents wait for it. We wait for that one honest conversation, that apology, that moment when the child who hurt us says, "I finally understand." But closure, it's a myth, a comforting idea, a soft ending in a world that often doesn't offer any. The truth is, most of us will never get the words we deserve. No big sit-down, no heartfelt, "I'm sorry I drifted away." And if we keep waiting for that moment, we end up stuck, still holding the door open for someone who may never walk through it. But here's the good news. You don't need closure from them. You can give it to yourself. You do that every time you choose peace over pain. Every time you breathe instead of break down. Every time you build a life that isn't dependent on whether or not they text back. That is closure. It's not a moment, it's a decision. One you make when you say, "I don't need anyone else to validate my journey. I know who I am." And you've been through enough to know this by now. Life is short. It's too short to be lived in emotional waiting rooms. Too short to beg for a seat at a table you built. You have more wisdom now, more patience, more understanding, and yes, more love than ever before. But it's time to turn that love inward. You gave your children your best years, your time, your energy, your heart. You were their safety net, their support system, their biggest fan, and nothing will ever change that. But now it's time to be all those things for yourself. It's not selfish, it's necessary. Because you still have life to live. There are still laughs to be had, books to be read, friends to meet for coffee, new hobbies to explore, sunrises to watch, grandkids to hold, if you're lucky. And even if not, there's still a future that belongs to you. And the best part, you get to step into it lighter. No more emotional weight dragging behind you. No more questioning your worth every time your phone stays silent. You are not forgotten, you are not invisible, you are not broken, you are evolving. You are remembering how to stand tall without anyone else holding you up. You are creating peace not by changing others, but by changing how you respond to them. You are no longer asking for love. You are being love to yourself. So if you've made it this far, I want to thank you. Because listening to something like this, especially when it hits close to home, takes strength. It means you're open, you're growing. You're choosing to heal, even if it's quietly, even if it's in your own time. And if you've ever doubted your impact, let me tell you something. Just because someone didn't say thank you, doesn't mean you didn't make a difference. Just because someone left, doesn't mean you didn't love them well. Just because someone couldn't love you back the way you deserved, doesn't mean you were hard to love. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply stop fighting for what's already let go of you. Not because you gave up, but because you finally chose peace. And that peace, it's what makes you powerful. So now take a deep breath. Feel the quiet, not as emptiness, but as a fresh start. You don't have to say a word. Your silence already speaks volumes. You don't have to win anyone back. You just have to remember who you are. And if this message touched you, even just a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe you're going through this right now. Maybe it's been years. Or maybe you're finally ready to stop holding on. Whatever it is, this is a place where your story matters. If you found comfort in this video, please give it a like so others can find it too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, Strong Elderly Life, for more conversations like this one. Because even after 60, There is still strength to be claimed, joy to be found, and peace to be built. One quiet day at a time. Here's to you, to the dignity you carry, the love you gave, and the life you still get to live. You've earned every moment of it.